Hello, and welcome to the Bury Me Alive podcast.
I'm your host, Technicality.
And I'm your host, Ghostly. Today, we will be talking about something that's a little different than what we normally cover, and that is aromantic and or asexual people and characters in media. This is something that I'm very excited for, and I'm very excited that we're getting to cover, because representation is super important, and there is very little representation of aro-ace people in media. So I did my darndest to try and find as much information as I could. Really quickly, hey Cal, what does aromantic mean?
It means you do not experience romantic attraction to other people.
Yes, it means that you experience little to no romantic attraction. It's a spectrum. And hey Cal, what does asexual mean?
You experience little to no sexual attraction to other people.
This being aromantic and or asexual is not your one and the other. You can be asexual but not aromantic, and you can be aromantic but not asexual. You can be both. It's a whole thing. So, we're going to be covering people and characters in the media that you can find who are one, the other, or both. So, Cal, do you want to start with people who are fictional or people who are real?
Let's start with the real people.
All right. The first person is kind of two people, and they are hosts of a podcast called Bury Me Alive. Their names are Ghostly and Technicality. Spoiler, it's us.
We exist?
We exist. I know, it's shocking, isn't it? One of the hosts of the show, whose name is Ghostly, hi, that's me, is aromantic and asexual, while the other host, Technicality, is asexual but not aromantic. Another person who you've probably heard of, who is aromantic and asexual, is Alice Oseman. Do you know who that is?
I've never actually heard of her, no.
She is the author and the creator of Heartstopper, as well as other books like Radio Silence, Loveless, and Solitaire. She is amazing, and she even writes books and even in her show, Heartstopper, she has aromantic and asexual representation. She even has a whole book called Loveless that has a aro-ace protagonist.
Hey, we love the representation.
We love her. There's also an activist named David J., who I actually didn't know about until I was doing my research for this, who is an asexual activist and came out in 2011 publicly before the term asexual was more widely known.
So do you think he spread that term?
I wouldn't say he spread that term, but I do know that he definitely helped more people realize, oh, this is a thing that I am.
Having the correct terminology can help a lot.
It really can. That's why representation like this is super important, because if you're like, hey, I can put a name to what I'm feeling and find other people who feel the same way based on this term, it's kind of awesome. Another person who you probably know, who is actually asexual, which you probably didn't know, is Marilyn Monroe, who is a singer and an actress who was insanely popular in Hollywood forever, really. She's still super popular today, despite the fact that she's passed away. If you look through her personal notes and diaries and in her autobiography, we find that she was actually asexual. And she was also someone who was depicted a lot in films she was in. She was in films like Men Prefer Blondes, The 7-Year Itch, and in those movies, she was portrayed as a very sexual being, but despite that, she was asexual. The next person is Michaela Cole, apologies if that is the incorrect pronunciation, who is a writer and director and an actress, and she is aromantic, and she talks a lot about being aromantic but not asexual and how that affects her in her day-to-day life.
That's really interesting. Does she have any books, or is it mostly public speaking?
She does mainly public speaking, and she mainly writes for television and film. So you can see that come through in the film and television.
That's awesome.
The next person is someone you've probably heard of, Nikola Tesla,
Wait, I didn't know that.
the inventor. Yep. Keep in mind, we don't know if they would actually identify with these terms if they had the availability now, because he was alive in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But he was never married, and he never had intimate or romantic relations with anyone, and openly in his journals and diaries discussed how he didn't see the importance in it, and it is believed that he would today identify as Aros. He had a strong distaste to getting married and having relationships like that. No matter how much people tried to set him up every single time, he was just like, no, get away from me, which I relate to.
Fair enough.
The next person is, I'm again probably going to mispronounce her name, is Yasmin Benot, who is a writer and an activist who is asexual, and she focuses her books on writing about women of color who are asexual and or aromantic.
What are some of her books?
She wrote a chapter in a queer anthology called We Can Do Better Than This, focusing on asexuality. She also wrote This Is My Truth, and she started the very popular hashtag of This Is What an Asexual Looks Like, which is a awareness tag online. So if you type it, it shows different people and who are asexual and shows how diverse all of us can look.
It's the main thing that I think a lot of people don't quite understand, that your sexuality has nothing to do with who you are as a person, like your personality. There's a lot of stereotypes, even when they're not true at all.
There's a lot of stereotypes with like asexuality and aromanticism that we just are horrible people and cruel because of some of the depictions, which I'll be getting into in a minute. In media, it mainly, when it's done incorrectly, it mainly depicts us as sociopaths who don't feel any emotion, which is not true. Very clearly not true. Another person who you probably know is Jaden Animations, who is a YouTuber and animator who is insanely popular, and she has openly talked about her experience being aromantic and asexual. There's also someone who is very near and dear to me, who is Cavetown, who is a musician, and I was in the top 0.5% of Spotify listeners for him this year. He openly has talked about being on the Ace spectrum. So for them, what they've talked about is that sometimes they feel romantic and or sexual attraction, but not always.
It's good to emphasize that it is not just one thing. It can mean different things for each people. It is a spectrum. It's not like a solid, this is how you're supposed to feel kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're both asexual in the way that we, I guess, feel attraction, I would say, is different. Even not just because I'm aromantic and you're not, just who we are as people, it's different. The last real person I have on my list is a YouTuber named Shubble, or Shelby is her real name, and she is very openly asexual. They've talked about that quite a bit, and honestly, check out Shubble. They make really great content. They mainly focus around Minecraft and other video games, and she's just a fun time.
Go watch Shovel now.
Go watch Shubble. After you finish this episode, go watch Shubble. All right, are you ready to hear some fictional characters.
Sure, let's go.
I really quickly want to point out a lot of the characters on this list are from cartoons because, shocking, cartoons have some of the most diverse representation. Also, it's primarily what I ingest in media is cartoons. I love cartoons, so disclaimer. The first character we have on the list is from the amazing TV show The Owl House, and the character is Lilith Clawthorne, who is canonically aromantic and asexual. In a stream by the creator of the show, Donna Terrace, it was depicting an audio clip spoken by the actress who voices Lilith, and it was in a character, and it was a letter that Lilith was writing to her friend Hootie, and talking about her never feeling romantic or sexual attraction. And that's implemented in the show, and her character. And she's still awesome. She's cool Aunt Lilith, and I love her. She's my favorite character. Another one of my favorite characters, who is Aros, is Peridot from Steven Universe, who I absolutely adore, and is canonly Aros, and one of the writers on the show, who is also aromantic and asexual, primarily writes for Peridot to help implement that part of her into the show.
That's cool.
This next character is not canonly asexual, but heavily implied to be asexual, and is actually a representation of bad asexual representation, and that is Spock from Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I'm a Trekkie, and Spock is absolutely one of my favorite characters. However, in the show, him not experiencing sexual attraction or just not showing interest in it is often done as a way to show that he is not human. And this is a reoccurring theme with other Star Trek characters as well. If you look at characters like Data, it is their lack of sexual orientation is used to show that they are not human, which is not true.
It's just not how that works.
Nope, not how it works. The next character, who I was very surprised to learn was asexual, canonly, is Perry the Platypus from Phineas and Ferb. The creator of the show confirmed that he is in fact asexual, and, fun fact, he is also gay. In the show, Perry the Platypus is seen going on a date that's very clearly depicted as a romantic date with another character named Peter the Panda, who is a guy.
The gay asexual platypus.
I know. We love him for that. Another character that was probably from your childhood who is canonly asexual is SpongeBob from SpongeBob SquarePants. Originally, when the character was said to be asexual, there was a lot of backlash, mainly because people thought it was a way of the creators trying to just say he's not gay, because a lot of people were theorizing that he was in a relationship with Patrick, which he still obviously could be if he's asexual. But in more recent years, Nickelodeon has taken a greater push to put him into queer character spaces, and if you go online and look at some of their content, you can see that he is on their Happy Pride posts with rainbows. I personally find SpongeBob to be funny being canonly asexual, because it's kind of a reference to the fact that he is a sea sponge who are in fact asexual. So it's also scientifically accurate.
We love the scientifically accurate characters.
I know, it's so good.
It's just an extra attention to detail that helps with the story, even if it's just a cartoon.
I mean, cartoons are still TV. They still need storylines. Another character who I personally love is the character Alistair from Hazbin Hotel, who is canonly aromantic and asexual. Hazbin Hotel is actually getting a reboot on Prime Video that's coming out. Actually, I think it'll be out the same day that this episode comes out, which is very exciting. I'm very excited. And it is a show about that takes place in hell, where demons are trying to exist, and the princess of hell, who his name is Charlie, she wants to create a hotel where demons and sinners can come together and try and repent so that way they can go to heaven instead. And Alistair is someone who works at the hotel. He's a radio demon, and he's one of the most powerful of them. And he is canonly aromantic asexual. And I love him. The next character is Georgie War from the book Loveless by Alice Oseman. This is what I was referring to earlier. And she is canonly aromantic and asexual. And the book Loveless is about her discovering that about herself, as well as her friends discovering that one of her friends is also asexual, and another one of her friends is also aromantic asexual. And it's about them kind of figuring that out and going about their experience.
It's good to also have it in realistic fiction. So you have a book that has actual similar experiences if you're looking to find the correct terminology and see what fits you best.
Yeah, and it's also by an actual aromantic asexual person, which is really cool. The next two characters are Todd Chavez, and I'm about to completely butcher this name, Yolanda Buenaventura from the TV show BoJack Horseman. I have not personally seen BoJack Horseman, so I don't know much about the show. I know it's commonly referred to as the Depressed Horse Show.
What?
And I know that Todd Chavez, the character I was referring to, is often used as an example of good asexual representation. He in the show is canonly asexual. He discovers that about himself through the show, and is an important part to his storyline trying to find a romantic relationship as an asexual person. And his partner, Yolanda, is also asexual, and we also hear about her experience being asexual, and they're in a very happy relationship. The next character is Mina Ashido from Boku no Hero Academia, which is a pretty popular show. Do you know what My Hero Academia is, Cal?
I've heard of it, but I've never actually watched it.
Yeah. So it is an anime where people have what are called quirks, which are superpowers, and they go to school to become heroes. I'm not explaining it very well. However, Mina is one of the characters in the show, and by the creators, she has been canonly confirmed to be aromantic. Not asexual, just aromantic. And the creators even took it one step further to give her another label, which is considered a micro label, so it's a more specific label for where she falls on the aromantic spectrum. And that is cupio-romantic, which means that she does not experience romantic attraction, but she wishes she could, which is kind of sad for Mina's character.
It's cool that they're representing micro labels, because a lot of them aren't represented as much, so people don't actually know what they mean. So it can not only help other people understand what it means better, but it can also give people a term that fits them better than the general term that is used.
And also, microlabels are something that a lot of people either really like or they don't like, and it can be kind of difficult to put microlabels in media because people are like, oh god, no, a microlabel? Ugh. But it's great. Do you.
Some micro labels have actually become a lot more popular. Like, pan is actually considered, like, pan-romantic, pansexual is actually considered a micro label of bisexual and biromantic.
Really?
Mm-hmm. because
Interesting.
it's the liking of two or more genders.
That's interesting to me. I say this as someone who is not bi or pan, but talking to a pan person. I would say that one is more of its own label because it is different. But I can see how they could be, but they are pretty easily associated to be together.
Hmm.
The next character on my list is Isaac Henderson from the TV adaptation of Heartstopper, and he is canonly aromantic and asexual, and he is not in the Heartstopper books and graphic novels, but he is in the TV show in which he is explicitly aromantic and asexual. In season 2, we see him exploring that part of his identity and finding out that he is aromantic and asexual, and it is explicitly said in the TV show, which is kind of a big deal because it's one of those cases where it's a more mainstream form of media. Similar with BoJack Horseman, it's different to have those labels specifically put in media that's directed more towards a queer audience, but in shows that are made to be more mainstream, having that representation is kind of big.
It allows for representation in a way that if someone has not been, it gives people who have not been exposed to queer media in a positive light a broader view.
Yeah. Also, from the Osman verse, if you will, is also from Heartstopper, is Tori Spring, who is also canonly asexual, and she is she's the sister of the main character of the books and the show, Charlie Spring. In Volume 5 of Heartstopper, she explicitly comes out to Charlie as asexual, and in her own book, Solitaire, she is also explicitly asexual. The next character is Seiji Maki from Bloom Into You, which is an anime that I also have not seen. Apologies. And he is canonly aromantic and asexual and is often prided to be good ace representation. We love that.
They do.
The next character is Gwenpool, or Gwendolyn Poole, from the Marvel Comics, who is canonly aromantic and asexual. Not to be confused with Gwen Stacy or Spider-Gwen. Gwendolyn Poole is a girl who in the comics is said to be from the real world, quote unquote, which is very confusing, but it is indicating that she is from our world. She's from our reality, from our space. And she is now in the comics universe. And she is a combination of Spider-Gwen and Deadpool. Like placing both of their character traits. And she has a vast knowledge of the Marvel Comics universe from being a major fan in our world. And she is explicitly aromantic and asexual, and is referred to as an asexual icon by her friends in the comics, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
I wish my friends called me an asexual icon.
I mean, you never asked to be called that.
Well, I shouldn't have to ask. I should just be.
Fair enough.
The next character is Connor Hawke, who is from DC Comics and is canonly and explicitly asexual. He is one of the people who have taken the title of Green Arrow, which is a superhero in the DC Comics. He was explicitly placed as asexual in DC Pride 2015 and was depicted with the asexual pride flag, and it had a short comic about him being asexual. To end this lovely little list, I have a podcast spotlight of 2 fictional characters who are canonly on the Aro or Ace spectrum from fiction podcasts that I heavily recommend and absolutely adore. The first character is someone that technicality does not get a break about me talking about is Jet Sekuliak from the Penumbra podcast, who is canonly aromantic and asexual. In the show, Jet is depicted as this, like, big, buff guy with a love for his car. And when another character in the show, Rita, is talking to him, the character Juno Steele indicates that maybe Jet is interested in Rita. Jet then says, I don't feel romantic or sexual attraction towards Rita, quite explicitly. And just like that. And Rita is like, ah. And then Jet immediately after follows up with, and I don't feel that for anyone. And Rita's like, oh, okay, that's fine then. Which is the correct response.
It is.
And then the last character to finish off this lovely list is Jonathan Sims from the Magnus Archives, who is canonly asexual. John is the main character of the Magnus Archives, which is another podcast that technicality does not get a break about me talking about. And he, in the show, has multiple romantic relationships that are honestly, like, healthy and loving. He has romantic relationships with a character named Georgie, and towards the end of the show, he has a absolutely amazing relationship with another character named Martin. And through that, John is still happily asexual. And his partners, who are not asexual, are just like, okay, cool. And on top of him being ace, he is also canonly biromantic and has relationships with both men and women. And everyone's chill with it. And it's lovely. The only person who's not chill with it is this giant monster who steals his ribs. But we don't care about him.
That is a very violent way to say I'm not okay with that.
Well, it's actually not related specifically to that. Well, okay, so before the guy knew that John was queer, he already had stolen one of his ribs. And then later in the show, when John's with Martin, he sees the guy and he's like, what is this, your little boyfriend? And he's like, yes, actually. And he's like, oh, well, can I have your other rib now? And John's like, sure, here you go.
Isn't that not stealing if you willingly give over your rib?
The way he does it's stealing. We're doing another episode later on the Magnus Archives. We'll get into this then. But yeah, that is my list of aromantic and asexual people and characters in media. Do you have any other that you can think of, Cal, that were not on my list?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Personal question time. How did you realize you were asexual?
I sort of just looked up terms online and then I'm like, oh, wait, that works. There wasn't something for me.
Was I the only one who went onto LGBTQ plus wiki?
I was just looking up different terms that I've been...
You're just on Google. I went to the wiki. I went to gay wiki.
Fair enough.
For me, I realized when it was actually after a health class, I was talking to other people in the class, and I was like, I don't know why we're covering something that only happens in movies. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, no one actually feels that way in real life. That's only something that people feel in movies. And they're like, no, I feel that way. That's something that people feel in real life. I was like, what? What are you talking about? I was genuinely confused. And then later looked up the term asexual. And then my realization for being aromantic was kind of similar, but not really. I was talking about a fictional character who I thought I had a crush on. I was talking about the character Keith Sensen from Keeper of Lost Cities. And my friend at the time was like, how do you know you have a crush on him? And I was like, because I want to be his friend. And they were like, do you want to have a romantic relationship with him? I was like, no. And like they gave me a list of romantic quote unquote activities, They're like, do you want to do any of these with him? And I was like, no, I just want to be his friend. And they're like, well, that's not crush then. And I was like, the heck you mean? And then realized I was aromantic.
You have fun stories.
I have fun stories, yeah.
It's just me looking up terms on Google.
Well, then I proceeded to Google the terms later.
Fair enough.
How did you realize you were pan-romantic? Do you have a fun story for that one?
Not particularly. I was, again, looking up terms. And, I mean, I had my first female crush that I acknowledged in 6th grade. But looking back on it, I'm pretty sure several I just didn't acknowledge.
Yeah, that's normal.
But, yeah, it's just me looking up stuff.
For me, I saw the funniest thing. I was on the internet and I found an audio clip that I was like, whatever, that's normal. Everyone feels that way. And then it cuts to another voice saying, what the poor chap did not, in fact, know is that not everyone feels that way. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much accurate. I believe that is all we have for the episode today.
Be a good person.
And you're valid, no matter what. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bury My Alive podcast. As a reminder, I'm your host, Ghostly.
And I'm your host, Technicality.
Thank you for listening and supporting us. Just listening is support. If you liked this episode, go ahead and like it. If you didn't, go ahead and dislike it. Whatever.
We don't care about your opinions.
And also, please leave some comments. Tell us about either your experience realizing you're queer in whatever way. Tell us about what you liked or didn't like about this episode, because this was a bit of a different episode than what we typically do. And we would love to hear your thoughts.
Goodbye and good night.
Hope you have a great day. Thank you.